Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Big Blonde and Beautiful, the podcast. My name is Kara Howie. If you're new here, each week we pick a piece of media with fat representation in it and we discuss the good and the bad of it. This week, we're going to be focusing on the John Waters movie Crybaby. And before we get into that, I have a special guest with me here today, Anne Kathleen Williams. She's a body positive influencer and content creator. She's worked with brands as a model, influencer, and UGC content creator. And she is an accomplished indie filmmaker based in Birmingham, Alabama. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. Any excuse to talk about movies.
Exactly. Full disclosure, I definitely took that information from your website and was like, let me use this.
That's what it's there for, right?
Exactly. I was like, this is what she wants me to know about her, so this is what I'm going to tell the people.
Love that. Yeah.
But is there anything that you're working on currently or that you
I've
wanted
got
to
a
add
short
to
film
that?
in post that's almost ready to be sent out to festivals. And you're always doing something creative, right?
Right.
But
It never stops.
My Instagram, everything stays updated pretty regularly on there. So that's if you think I'm interesting after this, that's the place to follow me.
I was curious before we get into our topic for today, just a little bit more about how you became a body positive content creator. Was it by accident? Was it purposeful? How did you get to where you are?
I kind of vacillate between body positivity and body neutrality, honestly. But it kind of started on like my own journey to like further my self-esteem, you know, uh, coming to the conclusion that that this is just the way my body wants to be. Like it may be a little bit smaller and it may be a little bit bigger. And so I was like, oh crap, like how am I going to build a social media following? I don't know. And at the same time, a lot of the people that were taking cinematography classes were also taking photography classes, and they kept going like, let me take your photo. Let me take your photo. And I was like, no. No. And finally I was like, I'm not photogenic. I was like, no, I don't know what to do in front of the camera. And finally I was like, fine, I'll do it. And then you're going to regret asking me. And then suddenly everyone kept asking me. So like all these people in the photography classes that I didn't even know were asking me. And I was like, oh, and then I started posting them on the internet. And I had already noticed at this point that like following people whose bodies look like mine in some way or another made me feel better about myself. So, and also like I love clothes. So like that's kind of where this like thing kind of merged for me. And um, a friend of mine who's a local plus size influencer, she and I had this conversation where like sometimes it becomes frustrating, right? Because it's like everything we do is automatically body positive content because we are in our bodies and we are positive about them, right? And we want you to be positive about your bodies no matter what you look like. And we're all for bodily autonomy for people and all that stuff. But like that doesn't mean that I want to be the poster child all the time for everything, you know? Sometimes I want to be like why do the thin, skinny white girls get to be the ones that have fun and the rest of us have to be out here teaching everyone else like lessons, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like there's like a level of frustration with me for that, because it's like, yeah, like I definitely like I'm here, I want you to see this and feel more comfortable in your body no matter what your body looks like, you know? And so like there's definitely that. So like I definitely vacillate a little bit more towards body neutrality and body positivity. Like my level of frustration, and it's not so much the community, it's the I don't know if I want to be a teacher every single second of the day. Some days I want to be a silly little goose.
Yeah, it can be exhausting, which is why I like asked that question, because like you said, you're automatically put in that body positivity space, which isn't necessarily a bad one, but
No.
it's not always what you were going for. You just happen to be in this body that people deem to not be like the societal standard for beauty. And then that just means, boom, you have to be an advocate for bigger
Yeah.
bodies, and
And
sometimes it's not what we're going for.
no, and I love doing it. I love like telling
Hmm.
people to be more inclusive in the media that they create. I love like having these conversations, and I do it all the time, and like talking about like self-esteem and what can we do to like on that journey. But like I do sometimes I'm like, God, wouldn't it be nice to just not have to do that all the time just
Yeah.
because you decided that's my role. But I also like genuinely love starting these kind of conversations. So it's like one of those, it
Hmm.
depends on the level of spoons I have every day, I think.
Yes, I've heard that before. Yeah, your level of spoons. I That's so accurate because sometimes I just get tired. I'm like, I would love to just post a picture of myself, feel like I'm cute, get a couple of yes, and then that's it. Like we don't have
Yeah.
to mention my body, but also like it's in the picture, so then people are gonna talk about it. So it's just kind of
Oh yeah.
nah.
And like people going, how do you have so much confidence? And I'm like, first of all, how do you know that I have so much confidence? You just assume that
Exactly.
I should be deeply ashamed of myself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's highly offensive.
Yeah, it's kind of like the backhanded, like, oh, I wish I could be like you. You're so confident. And I'm like, first of all, I sometimes have crippling anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not true all the time. And second of all, I've been in this body my entire life. Like, it's just my normal. So me just posting a picture, it's not something that I was like, I'm going to be brave today. It was just like, I like this picture and I'm going to post it. So,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And there's something nice about that too. Like just to have that moment. And like I said, like you want to come like when you were like, do you want to? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk about it because like John Waters is like he's so fascinating to me as a person, and like I think this is going to be like an interestingly nuanced conversation because there's like a lot to talk about and unpack with specifically Crybaby, and like
Yeah.
John Waters is a filmmaker, so I'm like that's exciting, and that's you know. But if people were like, this is the only thing you could ever talk about is plus size bodies in film, I would be like, oh God. Like, first of all, you've now limited me. It's like,
Yes. Teeny
there's
tiny.
almost none. I'm not claiming to be a John Waters expert, so come after me. I loved him as a teenager because, well, I mean, he had these two films that had Ricky Lake in them,
Hmm.
and she was unapologetically fat, and like there was nothing like them. There was like
Hmm.
nothing. And my mom showed them to me when I was like young, and I remember thinking, this is incredible. Like, why can't there be more movies like this? And he's delightfully weird, and like he pushed boundaries in a very interesting way. And of course, like, not everything ages well, but he definitely
Yeah.
made space for a lot of people that no one else was making space for,
Hmm.
and gave them their time to shine. And like, I think the thing that impresses me that like it's a double-edged sword for him, I guess I'll say, is that he does not care who he offends, right? So
No,
like,
he doesn't.
no, like he doesn't, but like in an equal like there's an equality in that. It's like
Hmm.
it's literally everyone, and that is the only way he was able to make these films, and the only way that he was able to put like a fat drag queen in movies and a fat girl and like and do all of these things, right, and push all these boundaries and have very unapologetically queer films, and like embrace the weirdness, and like he put a porn star in this movie. I remember a story from the DVD where it was like she got arrested in Baltimore just because she was a porn star, like the chief of police or somebody like that was like, or it had something to do with that, and she missed a day and they finally bailed her out, and she like apologized, and literally everyone on set was like, let me tell you a story of a time that I got in trouble with the police, just to like make her feel better. So that it was like the whole cast like telling her these stories, and they're like, there's no shame, like we're okay with what you do, and like, we're here to support you. And I think that's like a weird, uniquely like John Waters set. And like maybe more,
Yeah.
especially like you could find it more on an indie film than you could like
Hmm.
a big studio film. So like I think
Yeah.
he did like in his own way create safe spaces for people, but he also like he'll say the most wild thing and he does not care if he offends you. And like,
Yeah.
but like I said, it's a double-edged sword because that is the only reason he was able to make these movies that had spaces for the people that were like marginalized.
Yeah, it's definitely can be good for the time, but that tends to not age very well,
No, it doesn't
which
age very well.
we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But before we get too much more into this movie, I'm going to give a little synopsis for the people that haven't seen it. First of all, I recommend that you do watch it so then you can, really understand more about what we're talking about. But so Crybaby and the square rich girl Allison are star-crossed lovers at the center of this world. Fueled by hormones and the new rhythms of rock and roll, she turns her back on her squeaky clean boyfriend Baldwin to become a Drake and Crybaby's mole. This takes place in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's set in 1954, despite the fact that it has music from like the 80s and stuff in it. I don't know who was in charge of music, but it's okay. But yeah, that's a little synopsis about Crybaby. So, what are your first general thoughts on this movie?
It's it's a satire of like greaser films from the 1950s, and obviously like it satirizes the film Grease a lot. It makes a lot of references to like Elvis films from that particular, like Jailhouse Rock specifically.
Yeah.
And I think if you watch the movie and you don't know anything about that, the movie will seem a little confusing because they're like at some points just like openly mocking those films.
To his eyes, open up that door, just listen to his guitar, you know the score. Please, Mr. Jailer, let an honest man go free.
Yeah, but like
I also know that Johnny Depp took this role because Waters promised that like it would be making fun of like the heartthrob that he was kind of becoming in the public eye, and so he's like, yes, I want to do this because it is ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah. He was coming fresh off of 21 Jump Street. I think this was like filmed right at his like last season of that, and like that was like so mainstream, and Johnny Depp had no desire to be mainstream. I think like my feelings about this film are complicated because like I said before, it created spaces for a lot of people that didn't have space. It is highly offensive in certain areas. Yeah. So it's like,
should we bring up the Confederate flags that are literally plastered everywhere? Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I forgot that until I rewatched it the other day. I was like, oh my God, I guess I just like blocked that out. There's definitely some things that like, it's a movie that like, if you're very sensitive, if you're a highly sensitive person, I would skip it. You know, but if you can separate something and like be like, okay, well, this is from a different time and this was like considered progressive, and in order for that to be made and be progressive, we wouldn't be able to be where we are now. So like we have to take every step in society to take a step forward. So like I can appreciate that on that level. And like I said, I do appreciate him creating spaces for people where no one else was creating spaces. Like I would say almost nobody in the cast, except for like there's a couple people, but like a good percentage of the cast like probably would not have been put in a big studio film. You know,
no,
there's just no way.
Not. I also think I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, that the drapes are a lot more like diverse body wise and race wise than the squares, and I feel like that was very intentional.
Oh yeah, I think he's mocking upper white class culture for sure. You know, Hairspray is definitely his more diverse, like just in general diverse film. This one, I think he had been given more money for this one. It was like Hairspray had been such a big hit. I think this one, they had $11 million budget, which sounds like a lot of money. And it was a little bit more back then, but like still like $11 million to make a movie is not much. The thing with filmmaking is the more money, the more people like are like there's somebody that's given you the money and they've given you parameters, right? So like part of me wonders if that's like if it was like a little less diverse because some executive was like maybe less people of color this time. time, you know, and then maybe he felt beholden to that. Who's to say? But I was watching that, wondering that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he'd also be the kind of person to not necessarily take money from someone that was trying to really restrict him. Like maybe he could have gotten more money for the film if he would have like compromised his vision for it. Because I know that I also read that he wanted this movie to be like about bigotry and exclusion based on class. Because Hairspray was based on race.
Which,
obviously race and class, they go hand in hand.
That definitely makes sense, for the film. I mean, the Drapes definitely are like a more diverse group of people, and bless it, you have somebody like Hatchet Face, you know, which like that character, like there's aspects of that, like they're clearly making fun of the way that she looks, but like I do love that she's got a gorgeous boyfriend who loves her.
Tears fall from my eyes, then my heart starts to fall. Don't you realize, my baby, crying all the time.
And like is the whole time telling her she's beautiful, even when everybody else is making fun of her. I think that aspect of it I really like. But like you're like, we're literally calling a girl Hatchet Face.
Yeah.
So it's like simultaneously like you're like, yikes, but you're like, oh, but that's like genuinely sweet. Like that's why I said like the film's like incredibly nuanced. There are these like moments and things where you're like, okay, well that's awful, but there's like this it doesn't make up for it, but this is an aspect that I like, you know, I love seeing this person that's like, I love you and I don't care if anyone else thinks you're attractive. I think you're attractive and that's all that matters. And you're like, well, that's a great message. I would love to see that in more films. I wish we didn't call her Hatchet Face.
Yeah. There could have been a better name. Just one thing that I really like is how confident Ricki Lake's character is. She's like, I'm gonna tell you how it is. You're gonna listen. Get out of my way. Leave my family alone.
Oh yeah, and she's great. She's a powerhouse in this film. She gives birth in the back of a car while it's playing chicken. You know what I mean? Like, John Waters really gave Ricki. I mean, she had just done Hairspray and like carried that film, and I think she's a huge part of the reason, like a huge part of why Hairspray was so successful, because she is so charismatic and so fun, and I cannot think of a single director from that time period that would have ever even given her a chance, let alone let her star, you know? So, and like, because the only time you see fat women in like the media around this time is to like make fun of them, you know? There's there's like I think the Heathers came out around that time, and there was like Dump Truck. What was her name?
Martha Dunstock, but they called her Martha Dump Truck.
Yes, and I think that same actress was also in an episode of 21 Jump Street where they also made fun of her weight, you know, and like that's the kind of stuff that was like being portrayed all the time. And then you have Ricki Lake in both of these films, and she's cool and she's pretty and boys like her, you know, and there's no
and not just fat boys, all the boys.
all the boys, not just a boy, all boys are like, oh, hi, okay, you're cute, you know, and she's like talented and cool, and like it's so great. And like in this film in particular, she's just such an unapologetic badass.
Point. Hey, fine, mama. Welcome to the Jukebox Jamboree.
She can fight like a man.
Hey, girls. What do you think? Let's give Allison here a bad girl beauty makeover.
I actually think that really and truly, like, as far as like portrayal of a fat woman, this is a great one, right? There's no like, yeah, she's cool, but she'd be cooler if, you know, no, you're pretty for a fat girl. Like I don't think her weight is really ever brought up, at least, especially not by the people that are supposed to be the ones that love her.
No, not in the movie. Now, in real life, people are not so kind. No, I know that I mean, she lived through the 90s and early 2000s, which in and of itself were horribly fat shaming. I know that in more recent years, she's lost like a significant amount of weight, and she's talked
Mhm.
about how she's proud of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, taking care of yourself. And if that leads to weight loss, it does. But I know that she's talked about how she did crash diets and things. And I struggle sometimes with public figures when they say things like that. It's hard because I'm like, you're in the public eye. People are seeing this, fat people are hearing this, and it makes them feel bad about themselves. But also, like, you've had to deal with real life pressures. You're just a
Mhm.
human being
Yeah.
who, like all of us, wants to be accepted and loved. Like, it's so hard. It's such a gray area where I'm like, yeah.
I mean, I completely get it. And like, it's a thing that like, they experience the kind of like fat shaming and stuff that every fat person does, but on a scale that like, I think is hard to actually conceptualize. I
Hmm.
mean, to have your picture plastered. I know that I was watching some interviews of Ricky Lake and John Waters to like prep for this.
Hmm.
And she said that John Waters brought up the fact that they took pictures of her on set with the baby bump on, right?
Hmm.
And then and then like tabloids posted it as if that was her actual body and said, look how much weight Ricky Lake has gained, right? Look how bad she's doing. And like, and framed it. And like, of course, people believed it because people are stupid, Yeah, she did gain some weight, but she didn't
Yeah.
gain that much weight.
She talked about how I think she was at her heaviest during Crybaby. I
Mhm.
think she said in
Divine
a
had just
couple
passed away,
interviews.
and I think that she was having like in a rough emotional spot, which happens to all of us. Well, you get a little sad sometimes, you eat.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
think that to have that kind of stuff, and also like people are lying about you. You also at the same time, a thing that I think a lot of people don't think about, right? When we talk about celebrities, just in general, like I don't care what size you are, is that
Hmm.
so we think about like the tabloids and like the public and the pressure that we put on them, but their team, right? You have an entire group of people who make money based off of how much money you make, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so they're doing everything they can for you to make more money and for you to succeed and be more successful, right?
Hmm.
So if they see that you would be more successful if you lost weight, how much
Hmm.
pressure do you think they're going to put on you, right?
And
And
and they did when she had her first baby. She made like a
Mhm.
documentary or something about it, and they were like, "Listen, if you lose this amount of weight, people will start talking about you more, which will get you more airtime, which will make people want to watch your documentary." And so she did.
Mhm.
I'm like, I I I understand why they said that because they were right.
Mhm.
That did bring her a lot of attention, but also that's messed up and
Which is like
not
a
okay.
false reward system too, right?
Yeah.
So like then you're being rewarded for something that's like possibly dangerous and not healthy, and but your brain receives that dopamine, right?
Hmm.
And so like that's I always get like when people I'm always like, yeah, it is like real, like the whole like when Rebel Wilson started talking shit about fat people and she's like, I only did it for laughs. I'm like, well, like all you're doing is telling everyone that you're not a nice person,
Yeah.
like all that kind of
I
stuff. But I'm just
I
not
think
under
that
the same amount of
happens.
pressure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot even with smaller influencers like on TikTok. I mean, they have a significant following, but I've seen so many of them who have lost weight by like either exercising or they've gotten a surgery. And as soon as they lose that weight and are no longer considered fat, they turn their back on that body positivity or body neutrality idea. And they're
Hmm.
like, you need to lose weight. Like, life is so much better. I'm like, I'm sure you are treated better. I'm sure you got a lot of compliments because that's just how our society works. But also, remember how you felt when you were in a bigger body? Like, there are still plenty of people in those types of bodies, and they
Hmm.
deserve to be happy with or without weight loss.
I don't think anyone should have to tell anyone how to live in their own body because I
Hmm.
don't know what it feels like to be you. So like if like it turns out you have to have knee replacement surgery, so you're like going to lose 30 pounds so that you can have that surgery will work better. I'm not
Mhm.
going to shame you for losing it,
No.
or like I'm not going to shame you for staying the same weight, because I do not have to exist inside of your body, and no
Yeah.
one exists inside of mine. So like I wish for everyone the same amount of body autonomy that I wish for myself, right?
Mhm.
I will mind
Yes.
my business if you mind yours, right?
And that's such like I want to go back in time to when we decided that it was okay for us to comment on people's appearances and be like, knock it off.
Yeah, stop.
Like,
Just stop.
why we're so conditioned. Even so, I work with children, and I just recently, they have been commenting on my body more and more. And normally I would try to be like, it's okay. People come in all different shapes and sizes. But these past couple of weeks, it's been like a constant thing. And I'm like, I'm over it. So now I'm just like, please stop commenting on my body. Like, I understand that you're curious, but my body is not yours to talk about. So there's so many other things we can talk about. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, I would say my body is the least interesting thing about me. And if you have just condensed me down to just that, then like you're missing out entirely.
It's
like
just a vessel for what carries me and allows me to do the things that I enjoy and that make me an interesting person. So,
well, and then like just as a society, we just don't think about how much fat phobia is like tied to ableism, right? And this idea of that like we have more control over our health than we think we do. Like people really think they've got control over their health, but like it's so much genetics. Because think about
calories in, calories out.
Yeah. No, there's like some little old lady that smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and never drank water, only drank Dr. Pepper, and she lived to be 102. Okay.
She did.
And then there's a man who ran every day and then dropped dead on his 52nd birthday because he had a hole in his heart that he didn't know about. Like you will either like live to be unhealthy or die healthy, or you're like some of us who just never got to be healthy in the first place. Right. And like, if your health is what determines your value, that's bad news for everybody. Because like eventually you will get here too. Like our bodies are like that's a fun conversation, but like our bodies are deteriorating as we speak. That's the point of existence. And your body is supposed to change. It's not ever supposed to be the same. Like every single second your body is changing. Like you have molecules changing, like your cells are like dying and constantly. And you're scared that you may not fit into the same jeans you wore when you were 15 years old. What an insane thing to think.
Yeah. I don't fit into anything that I had when I was 15. I don't know. I mean, I have some clothes that I've had for a while, but I don't care. Like, if they stop fitting, if they get too big or too small, like, they're just clothes. It's not worth freaking out about. Which has taken me a long time to get there. I hope the audience that you don't get like it misconstrued. It's not always easy.
No, it's certainly not easy.
Yeah. Like everyone else, I have good days, I have bad days, but that's life. Like you said, things are always ever changing. So
ever changing, and I wake up every day feeling a different way about myself. When I think about celebrities, like, and the amount of pressure that they're under, I just like, I try to have a little bit of grace for them, because I just like, and it's hard. And I do this too, right? Because we all do. Because you see somebody and I think it doesn't help that there are so few fat celebrities, right? So every time you see one go, you're like, well, now there's even one less. There's even less,
Yeah,
it's like, oh God.
When they have the surgery or they get canceled or something, you're like, no. But the thing is, like, it's their right to do that. Unfortunately, sometimes it is a lot of outside pressures, especially for the surgery. But maybe also they needed that for some other reason that we don't know.
No. Yeah, it's a medical reason that's nobody's business.
Exactly. And like if there were more fat celebrities, then we wouldn't feel that way when one of them just decides to change their body. Like, yeah, it's a whole thing.
it just boils down to like we just definitely need more representation of marginalized people, period, in media, you know, because I think
Mhm.
that everyone feels a little bit that way. And like you said before, like it is their right, it's their bodies to do these things. And we want to hold on to them because we're like, well, if I don't have you, who do I have? And I think
Yeah.
once I realized that was what I was feeling, and it didn't really have anything to do with the person that I was looking at,
Mhm.
I could let go of my frustration with them and what they did with their own bodies. And I could be like, okay, this is upsetting to me because now I feel like I have lost someone that I thought was on my team.
That's why I think people like Ricky Lake did do stuff like that. You know, like we said, they were advised. They
Mhm.
had outside pressure from people thinking it's their right to comment on their bodies. And like I also wonder because like why did he have her be pregnant in
Mhm.
this movie? I didn't know if it had anything to do with her weight
I
or
don't think it
just
was
for the
her.
storyline.
I think it wasn't her weight. I think it was there's this like stigma. It's not as bad anymore, but like there was
Mhm.
this stigma about teenage pregnancy, right? And
Yeah.
specifically keeping the baby. That was considered to
Mhm.
be very low class, right? So she has the twins and she's pregnant with the third child. So I think
Yeah.
I think was a comment on class.
Grandma, so happy, all knocked up. I wish I was having triplets.
And
Gotcha.
I think he just thought the idea of Ricky as a mother was like not because of her weight, just because she
Mhm.
was had just played this. I mean, I can't say I didn't see this written anywhere, but this is kind of my
Mhm.
interpretation of it is that she had just played this kind of wholesome character. So now she's
Oh
playing this
yeah.
girl. Yeah,
Had
in
premarital
Hairspray,
sex?
that was her character in Hairspray had not had sex. Okay. You know,
Mm-mm.
she's like fantasizing about getting a kiss and then getting married, you know?
Yeah.
I think at one point they do talk about sex because he does sexualize things, but like she started out kind of a pretty innocent and then she goes through the journey. Because Hairspray's
Yeah.
the original is raunchier than the musical a little bit because they
Mhm.
made that more I mean, obviously it's gonna be on Broadway. People are gonna bring their kids, but
Yeah.
they made it a little more family friendly. But I think it was that she played this like kind of wholesome character, and so he thought he would take advantage of this like idea of that society had just gotten about who Ricky was and then put her in
Mhm.
something just to juxtapose the two characters, which I
Yeah.
thought was like kind of clever and interesting. And he was doing the same thing with Johnny Depp. You know,
Yeah.
he was in 21 Jump Street playing this like all-American cop that was like this, you know, heartthrob that all the it
Mhm.
was, you know, in Teen Beat and all the girls loved him. And here he's playing this like very kind
Yeah.
of bad boy.
Listen, I hate to say it, Johnny, but to be honest, you were really hot and crybaby.
Oh,
And you
Johnny
did
was
not stop the heartthrob.
he's so hot. He's so hot. It's not his actual singing voice. I'm pretty sure that's somebody else that they
Oh.
dubbed. Yeah. But I
Mhm.
think they wanted someone that sounded more like Elvis than him.
Okay.
Specifically because of the references they were making to all the Elvis movies.
Mhm.
And I think that he just couldn't do it good. Again, this is like me remembering watching the director's
Mhm.
commentary on the DVD when I was like 15 years old. So please do not come for me if I'm wrong. But I think that it was like they were making a lot of references to Jailhouse Rock specifically, and they really wanted someone that could sound more like Elvis, and he just didn't have it in him to do that, which is fair, you know.
Yeah.
Most of us can't.
No.
But he did sing in Sweeney
I mean, we saw
Todd.
what it did to Austin Butler.
Oh God,
So
changed his
be careful.
accent for forever. I think I saw
Yeah.
him doing an interview for Dune, and he still has a little bit of that Elvis twist.
He does. I'm like, sir, was it worth it?
He had an
I
Oscar
don't know. It's
knob,
not a
so
bad
maybe.
accent. It's
Yeah,
just
no, it's not. It's just different.
yeah, I think that's the youngest I've ever seen him in a movie.
Oh yeah,
So
I think it's got to be one of his first roles.
all right, this said Tracy Lord, Susan Terrell, Kim McGuire, Ricky Lake. A movie full of fabulous female performances. It's so fun and stupid. In the John Waters canon, I find this to be the only film that the supporting characters are far more interesting than the leads. And I agree with that.
No, I do agree with that, but I think that's intentional. Because I think that, like, in a lot of those movies, the main characters are boring. Well, that's like most rom-coms. I think the romantic leads in rom-coms usually are very boring, and then the sidekicks or whatever on the side are more interesting.
Yes. And then here's the last one that just made me giggle. It said, you could watch Grease while high on meth, or you could just watch this instead and save yourself the trouble of having to buy meth.
That's great. I don't know if I've never taken meth, so I don't know what kind of ride it takes you on, but it sounds. I would think maybe more like shrooms.
Maybe. Don't do drugs, kids. Don't do meth.
Drugs. Don't do, yeah, especially not meth, because we like your teeth in your mouth where they belong.
Mm-hmm. But I was like, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, that was the point. It was supposed to be like a weird version of Grease where they they like embodied the stereotypes of the 1950s heartthrob. So, but yeah, that one made me giggle.
Yeah. No, that's a great one. They need to someone needs to send that to John Waters, and he needs to put it on like, if they ever re-release the film, there needs to be the quote underneath. I knowing him, he would probably do that and agree.
Yeah. He's like, absolutely, that's exactly what I was going for. All right. I think the time has come where we have to give our final thoughts on whether or not we think generally overall it's positive or negative fat representation.
You know what? I think generally it is positive, because like, in no way, shape, or form is Ricky. They don't have, in the movie, they never bring up her weight, right? She's not.
Correct.
She's probably the coolest of the girls. You know, she's tough. She's badass.
Absolutely.
She doesn't take shit from anybody. I think it's positive.
Yeah, I have to agree. I also think it's positive. Like you said, Ricky Lake, amazing, badass, doesn't take shit from anyone. And then also, despite her being called Hatchet Face, I think she's also,
Yeah, she's also, yeah. She's mid-sized and is comfortable in herself, and she has that positive, like, well, one, she has all those positive friendships, right, where people value her for what she gives as a person, and like, I don't think any of them see her as being unattractive, and especially not her boyfriend, you know. So she's got this person who just like loves and adores her, you know, in a way that is so genuinely sweet and kind.
Yeah, he's a cutie. I think so. Overall, positive. Even though it's a wild ride, he does a good job of being size inclusive and just like letting people exist in their bodies without having to make a comment on it, which is very refreshing.
Which is very refreshing and doesn't even happen in most films now.
Nope, it's very rare. I think we've moved on from somewhat from the fat suits and the ha-ha humor of fat people to more of like what some people I've talked to have called sympathy porn.
Yeah, I was gonna say trauma porn.
Where you're like, oh, I feel so bad for you. I'm like, okay.
Yep. Great. Love you. That's the whale. The whale. That's 100% what that is. I think that, like, we don't talk about all eating disorders the same. And that is a thing that's like deeply upsetting to me. Like, if we talked about them all with like a level of equality, that would be fine. But like, you know, if we were like, if we saw like an anorexic person and people were making like sympathy porn, like where it was like, oh, you're killing yourself, you're gonna die, but we don't, like, you know, like we let people get so anorexic before we're telling them that they're gonna die, and like someone can just gain 10 pounds and people are like, I'm worried about your health, and you're like, clearly you've never heard of the obesity paradox, but okay.
All right. Well, I think that is all for this week's episode. Thank you for being here with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on.
Is there you want to plug your social media so people can find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so my social media is Love and Kathleen, and it's that on everything. I'm most active on Instagram. My website you're talking about is loveandkathleen.com. And yeah, I post about all kinds of stuff on there. So check me out, send me a DM. I almost always respond to my DMs. But yeah, I love talking to people. I love it when people ask me questions or for movie recommendations or tell me their opinions. Like, let's have a discourse, let's talk, and let's have a good time.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can also follow the podcast on TikTok at bbb.thepodcast and Instagram at bbb.podcast. You can also follow me on all platforms at Carolina Howie. And until next time, stay fat and fabulous. Bye.
Bye.